Hi, everyone. Welcome to Enterprise Incident Response. My name is Mark Murphy. I've been involved in information security for about 8 years. I've been an analyst, consultant, engineer, and I have experience working on multiple global incident response situations. I'm excited about this course, and I hope you are too. So, before we get into enterprise incident response, we need to start kind of at the beginning and we need to develop our incident response plan. An incident response plan is just a document that contains your procedures, your policies, the things that you'll reference during a cybersecurity incident. The main takeaways for this course are gain an understanding of incident response. Why is it so critical to organizations and how to start developing an incident response plan in your organization? Having an incident response plan can help organizations minimize losses, patch exploitable vulnerabilities, restore affected systems and processes, and close the attack vector that was used. An effective incident response plan allows organizations to establish best practices for incident handling and develop a communication plan that may involve notifying business partners, law enforcement, employees, and staff. This information needs to be developed before a security incident is actually happening. So let's begin. So, the first thing to point out about incident response documents is there's never a final version of a playbook. Playbooks should be updated after incidents, anytime there's key personnel changes to the threat landscape at your organization, and after updates to any security tools. Playbooks should also be updated on a regular basis. I would recommend at least quarterly just to make sure that they're current, make sure that you're not missing any incidents that might have happened but failed to include in your initial documentation. The point is, once you start the incident response playbook, keep it updated and keep working at it, and remember to include as many incidents as you can. Before we get too deep into incident response, it's important to understand if there are any standards or regulations that must be adhered to. So, if you are unsure about any of these requirements, I would strongly urge you to check with your legal department and identify any requirements. Some examples of different standards and regulations to consider are GDPR, ISO, SOX, HIPAA, and PCI DSS. We won't get into these regulations and standards in this class, but they would be important to know. So, just kind of starting at the beginning, what is an incident? According to NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, a cybersecurity event has been determined to have an impact on the organization, prompting the need for response and recovery. An occurrence that actually or imminently jeopardizes without lawful authority the integrity, confidentiality, or availability of information or an information system, or an occurrence that constitutes a violation or imminent threat of violation of law, security policies, security procedures, or acceptable use policies. And as we start to build our incident response playbook, there are different frameworks and different models that can be referenced. One popular framework is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. I've seen this framework used at government entities, I've seen it used at Fortune 500 companies, small business. It's very popular because it's very thorough. There's only 5 steps, but each of the steps breaks down incident response into a small digestible chunk of information. And as you work through an incident, you'll go through each of the 5 phases, and it provides a terrific framework for you to model your incident response. So, starting with identify, that's where you identify the issue, the security alert, and it takes you all the way to recover, where the incident is over, you're doing your post-mortem analysis and updating your playbook. Another popular framework is the SANS Incident Response Framework. This one is commonly called PICRL, and it stands for Preparation, Identification, Containment, Eradication, Recovery, and Lessons Learned. So, very similar to NIST, this one will also walk you through an entire incident, starting with preparation all the way to lessons learned. We won't get into too many details about these models, these frameworks in this class, but in the next class, we'll go over them in more detail. While it is important to create playbooks, it's also important to understand that cybersecurity incidents don't always follow just one type of attack, meaning it might be necessary to deviate from a playbook during an incident. You might need to reference more than one incident response playbook, and there's also a possibility of multiple attacks going on. So if you have multiple attacks going on, if they're in multiple locations, multiple sites, then chances are you'll probably have to involve more than one incident response playbook. So, before we get too deep into our discussion on incident response, it's important to review a cornerstone of an organization's infrastructure. I'm sure you've heard of this by now. It's the CIA triad, and it helps security teams with risk assessments and asset management. The CIA triad is a good reference tool for securing information systems. We'll get into that a little bit more. So, CIA definition, just starting with C, confidentiality. Confidentiality ensures that sensitive data is accessed only by authorized persons. So, try and think of it as like a need to know. You want to make sure information is accessible only to people who actually need it. An example of a confidentiality scenario would be a popular website gets breached, an attacker downloads the entire database, including usernames and passwords, and sells that database on the darknet. This is a violation of confidentiality because sensitive customer data was exposed to unauthorized persons. So when the attacker hacked into the website and downloaded the database, that was the confidentiality compromise, and this would be a very serious security incident. So moving along with the CIA triad, I is for integrity. Integrity just means that information isn't tampered with, modified, manipulated inappropriately. So an example would be an attacker who launches a successful SQL injection attack on a financial website that changes stock values in a database for their personal gain. This is obviously an attack, and it's an integrity violation because of the data tampering and manipulation of the stock values. Continuing with the CIA triad, availability. Availability is just ensuring that people have access to the information they need when they need it. So, in this example, a botnet performs a DDoS attack against a large DNS provider that results in the inaccessibility of several high profile websites. So, try and think like an attacker launches a DDoS attack against Facebook. So, you go to Facebook in your web browser, you'd be unable to access the page because of the availability attack, and the website would not be accessible to legitimate customers.